Some moments change everything. One second you're standing, the next you're falling. Someone catches you in a way that makes them see you for the very first time. This is a story about exhaustion, unexpected jealousy, and the moment when a powerful man realized that the person he'd overlooked for years was the one he couldn't live without. Natalie Brooks had been running on empty for weeks. Her reflection in the elevator mirror showed dark circles under her eyes. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched the stack of reports. 3 years as executive assistant to Julian Hayes, CEO of Hayes Enterprises, had taught her many things. Mainly that he expected perfection, demanded loyalty, and rarely noticed the person behind its perfectly organized schedule. The morning sun barely touched the glass towers of downtown when Natalie arrived at the office. She was always first, preparing Julian's day before he swept in like a storm at 8 sharp. Coffee brewed, emails sorted, contracts reviewed, meetings prepped. Her desk was a command center, and she ran it with military precision because anything less earned his cold disapproval. Julian Hayes was a force of nature. Tall, commanding, with sharp features, and eyes that missed nothing in business, but apparently everything else. At 35, he'd built his father's modest company into an empire. People said he had ice in his veins, that he cared for nothing except profit margins and quarterly reports. Natalie had believed that once. Now, she knew better. He wasn't cold. He was buried under responsibility and expectations. Isolated in his tower of success, but understanding him didn't make working for him any easier. This week had been particularly brutal. A merger looming, investors demanding attention, endless presentations that needed perfecting. Natalie had worked past midnight every night. Breakfast was coffee, lunch was forgotten, dinner was whatever she could grab from a vending machine. Sleep came in 3-hour intervals on her couch, because going to bed felt like giving up. She was running on fumes and determination, held together by pride and the mortgage on her small apartment. At 1 in the afternoon, standing in Julian's office with yet another folder in her hands, Natalie felt the world tilt sideways. The floor seemed to rush up toward her face. Julian turned from the window where he'd been surveying his kingdom, irritation clear on his features. "The Henderson files? Are they complete? I need them before the 3 o'clock call." Natalie opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. Instead, the room spun violently. Her vision narrowed to a tunnel. The folders slipped from her fingers, papers floating down like snow as her knees buckled. Strong arms caught her before she hit the marble floor. Julian's voice, sharp with something she'd never heard before, cut through the darkness. "Natalie, stay with me." She came to on his leather couch, Julian kneeling beside her with his tie loosened and genuine fear in his eyes. For a moment, Natalie couldn't process what she was seeing. Julian Hayes, who once held a board meeting during a fire alarm, looked absolutely terrified. "Don't move," he commanded, but his hand was gentle as it touched her forehead. "When did you last eat something?" Natalie tried to sit up, but he stopped her with a firm hand on her shoulder. "Yesterday morning, I think. Maybe the night before." The words came out weak, embarrassing. Julian's jaw clenched. "You think? That's unacceptable. I'm calling an ambulance." "No, please." Natalie managed to catch his wrist as he reached for the phone. "I just need to go home and rest. It's just exhaustion." He studied her for a long moment, and Natalie saw something shift in his expression. Concern? Yes, but something else too. Something that made her heart beat faster despite her weakened state. "Fine, but you're not going alone. Call someone to pick you up. Now." With shaking hands, Natalie pulled out her phone and dialed the one person who always answered. "Derek, I need you to come get me from work. I'm not feeling well." Julian watched her make the call, his expression unreadable. "Who's Derek?" he asked after she hung up. "Someone I trust," Natalie replied, too tired to elaborate. 20 minutes felt like hours. Julian canceled his meetings, brought her water, adjusted the pillow behind her head. He hovered like he'd never hovered over anything in his life, and Natalie found it both touching and confusing. This wasn't the boss she knew. When the receptionist called up announcing a visitor, Julian insisted on escorting Natalie downstairs himself. He supported her elbow as they walked to the elevator, his body tense with protective energy that made no sense for an employer worried about an employee. The lobby doors opened, and Derek rushed in. At 32, her brother was everything Julian wasn't in that moment, openly warm and immediately comforting. Without hesitation, he scooped Natalie into his arms like she weighed nothing. "Jess, what happened?" "You're working yourself to death," Derek said, his voice thick with worry and disapproval. Natalie tried to protest. "I can walk." "Not happening." "You collapsed, little sister. I'm taking you home." Julian stood frozen, watching this exchange. Natalie saw his hands clench into fists, saw the muscle jump in his jaw. When Derek turned to leave, carrying her effortlessly toward the exit, Julian's voice stopped them. "Wait!" He stepped forward, extending his hand formally. "Julian Hayes. I'm Natalie's employer." Derek shifted Natalie in his arms and shook Julian's hand briefly. Derek Brooks. Her brother. Something electric passed through the air. Natalie pressed against Derek's chest, watched Julian's face transform. Relief, confusion, and something darker all flickered across his features in rapid succession. "Take care of her," Julian said, his voice rough. "And Natalie, don't come back until you're fully recovered. That's an order." As Derek carried her out to his car, Natalie looked back through the glass doors. Julian stood in the middle of the lobby, hands in his pockets, watching them leave. Even from a distance, she could see the tension in his shoulders, the intensity in his gaze. Something had changed. In the moment she'd fallen, something fundamental had shifted between them. Julian Hayes had caught her, but in doing so, he'd stumbled into feelings he didn't understand. That night, alone in his penthouse, Julian paced like a caged animal. The image of another man carrying Natalie away played on repeat in his mind. He'd felt rage, possessiveness, jealousy, emotions he'd never allowed himself to feel. For 3 years, she'd been invisible to him, except as the person who made his life run smoothly. Now, he couldn't stop thinking about her pale face, her trembling hands, the way she'd fit in his arms for those few seconds before consciousness returned. Her brother. Derek was her brother. The relief Julian felt was disproportionate and telling. He poured himself a drink and stared out at the city lights. Finally admitting what his heart had been trying to tell him all day, Natalie Brooks wasn't just his assistant anymore. She was the woman who'd been right in front of him all along, and he'd been too blind to see her. Now that he had, everything was different. Everything. The morning after her collapse, Natalie woke to Derek cooking breakfast in her tiny kitchen. Pancakes, eggs, fresh fruit arranged on a tray like she was royalty. Her brother had always been overprotective, but this was excessive, even for him. "You scared me yesterday," Derek said, setting the tray on her lap. "When's the last time you took a real break?" Natalie picked at the food, her appetite still weak. "I can't afford breaks. You know how competitive my field is? If I show weakness, someone else takes my place. Is any job worth your health?" Derek sat on the edge of her bed, concern etched deep in his features. "That boss of yours works you like a machine." Before Natalie could defend Julian, something she found herself wanting to do, her phone rang. Julian's name flashed on the screen. Derek raised an eyebrow as she answered. "Hello? Natalie, how are you feeling?" Julian's voice was softer than she'd ever heard it, lacking its usual commanding edge. "Much better, thank you. I'll be back tomorrow, no." The word was firm, but not harsh. "Take the rest of the week. I mean it. Your health is more important than any merger." Natalie blinked in surprise. In 3 years, Julian had never suggested she take time off. "But the Henderson deal? I'll handle it. Just rest. Please." After she hung up, Derek was grinning. "Please? Your Ice King boss said please? What happened in that office before I got there?" Natalie threw a pillow at him, but her cheeks burned. She'd been wondering the same thing. The man who'd held her yesterday, who'd looked at her with such raw concern, wasn't the Julian Hayes she thought she knew. Over the next 3 days, Julian called every morning and evening. Short conversations, awkward at first, but gradually becoming easier. He asked about her sleep, her meals, whether she needed anything. On the 3rd day, A delivery arrived at her door. Fresh groceries, prepared meals, vitamins, and a handwritten note in Julian's precise script. Your health matters. Don't forget to eat, JH. Natalie traced the letters with her finger, her heart doing complicated things in her chest. Derek, watching from the couch, shook his head with a knowing smile. That man's got it bad, and he doesn't even realize it yet. Don't be ridiculous, Natalie protested. But her voice lacked conviction. When she returned to work on Monday, the office felt different. Julian had hired an assistant to help with her workload, reduced her hours, and instituted a mandatory lunch break. He'd also redistricted her desk, moving it closer to his office. Close enough that he could see her through the glass walls. Welcome back, Julian said when she entered his office for the morning briefing. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept well. How are you feeling? Completely recovered. Thank you for everything you did. Should have noticed sooner. His voice carried an edge of guilt. You were burning out right in front of me, and I was too focused on deadlines to see it. Natalie wanted to tell him it wasn't his fault, that she'd hidden her exhaustion well, but the vulnerability in his expression stopped her. This was new territory for both of them. The weeks that followed brought subtle changes. Julian started taking lunch breaks, something he'd never done, and often invited Natalie to join him. They'd eat in his office, talking about work at first, then gradually about other things. She learned he loved old movies but never had time to watch them. He discovered she dreamed of starting her own consulting firm someday one afternoon. As they reviewed contracts over sandwiches, Julian set down his pen and looked at her directly. Can I ask you something personal? Natalie's heart skipped. Of course, that day you collapsed. Why did you call Derek instead of letting me help you? She considered the question carefully. You were already there helping. And Derek's my family. He's been taking care of me since our parents died 5 years ago. It's habit, I guess. I see. Julian's expression was difficult to read. You're close with him. It's my only family. My big brother, my protector, my best friend. Natalie smiled softly. Why do you ask? Julian looked away, a muscle working in his jaw. I thought he might be someone else. Someone more than family. Understanding dawned slowly, then all at once. Natalie set down her coffee carefully. Julian, were you jealous? The silence stretched between them, loaded with unspoken truths. When Julian finally met her eyes, there was no hiding what she saw there. Desire, confusion, something that looked dangerously like longing.
Yes.
He admitted quietly. I was jealous. I am jealous. Of any time someone else gets with you, of whoever makes you smile, of the fact that you trusted someone else to take care of you that day instead of letting me. Natalie's breath caught. Why? Because somewhere between you organizing my chaos and challenging me when I'm wrong, between your smile on difficult days and your dedication to everything you do, I started seeing you. Really seeing you. Julian leaned forward, his voice dropping to something intimate and raw. And now I can't stop, Julian. Natalie didn't know what to say. Her heart was racing, years of hidden feelings suddenly validated. I know this is complicated. You work for me. There are rules, expectations. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident. But I can't keep pretending I don't feel this. When you collapsed in my arms, when I thought something serious was wrong, I realized you'd become the most important person in my life without me even noticing when it happened. Natalie felt tears prick her eyes. You want to know something? I've had feelings for you since my first week working here. But you were my boss, untouchable, and I was just the assistant who kept your schedule. So I buried it deep and tried to be professional. Julian stood, moving around the desk until he was standing in front of her. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was tender, careful, reverent. You were never just anything, Natalie. I was just too stupid to see what was right in front of me. What do we do now? She whispered. We figure it out together, Julian said. If you want to, I know this could complicate your career, your life, but I'm asking for a chance. Let me take you to dinner, away from this office, away from boss and assistant. Just Julian and Natalie, seeing where this could go. Natalie stood, closing the small distance between them. For years, she'd maintained careful space, professional boundaries. Now, she let herself step into his orbit, close enough to feel his warmth. "Yes," she said simply, "I want that." The smile that transformed Julian's face was worth every complicated thing that would come next. He took her hand, threading their fingers together, and for a moment, they just stood there, savoring the shift from what they'd been to what they might become. Outside the office windows, the city continued its busy rhythm, unaware that inside, two people had finally found the courage to reach for something real. That evening, Natalie stood in front of her closet for the third time, trying to decide what to wear. This wasn't a business dinner. This was Julian asking her out as a man interested in a woman, and the significance of that made her hands shake as she reached for a deep blue dress. Derek appeared in her doorway, arms crossed, wearing his protective big brother expression. "So you're really doing this? Dating your boss?" "We're having dinner." Derek, one dinner. But Natalie couldn't hide her smile. "That man looked at you like you were the only person in the world when I carried you out of there." Derek's expression softened. "Just be careful with your heart, okay? Mixing work and romance can get messy. I know the risks." Natalie turned to face him. "But what if I don't take this chance? What if I spend the rest of my life wondering what might have been?" Derek pulled her into a hug. "Then I guess you have to try. Just remember, if he hurts you, Big Brother's got your back." When Julian arrived at 8, he looked different without the armor of his business suit. Dark jeans, a casual button-down no tie. He looked younger, more approachable, and absolutely nervous. It made Natalie love him a little already, seeing this powerful man rendered uncertain by feelings. "You look beautiful," Julian said, and the sincerity in his voice made her blush. The restaurant he chose was intimate and quiet, the kind of place where real conversations happened. They ordered wine and food, but both were too nervous to eat much at first. The weight of crossing from professional to personal hung between them, like a bridge they were both afraid to fully step onto. "I've been thinking a lot this past week," Julian began, turning his wine glass slowly, "about how I got here, running a company, commanding boardrooms, but somehow missing what was most important." "What do you mean?" Natalie asked softly. "I built everything I thought mattered. Success, wealth, reputation. I worked 16-hour days and called it dedication. I demanded perfection and called it leadership." He met her eyes. "But when you collapsed, when I thought I might lose you, none of that other stuff mattered. The contracts, the deals, the money, all of it felt meaningless compared to making sure you were okay." Natalie reached across the table, taking his hand. "You didn't lose me. I'm right here. I know. But it made me realize I'd been living half a life. Going through motions, checking boxes, never stopping to feel anything real." Julian squeezed her hand. "You made me feel, Natalie. Fear when you were hurt, jealousy when I thought you belonged to someone else, hope when I realized maybe I had a chance. You brought me back to life." Tears gathered in Natalie's eyes. "Julian, I need you to understand something. I don't want to be another item on your achievement list. I don't want to be the girlfriend who looks good at company events but gets lost in your schedule. You won't be." His voice was fierce with conviction. "I'm changing things, Natalie. I've already started. Reasonable hours, actual weekends, time for life beyond work. Because what's the point of building an empire if you have no one to share it with?" "What about at work?" Natalie asked the practical question they'd both been avoiding. "How do we handle this there? Carefully, professionally." Julian had clearly thought this through. "At the office, you're my executive assistant, the best one I've ever had. We maintain boundaries, keep things appropriate. But after hours, we're just two people trying to build something real. If anyone has a problem with it, that's their issue, not ours." "People will talk," Natalie warned. "They'll say I slept my way to my position, that you're showing favoritism. Let them talk. You've earned every promotion, every raise, every bit of respect through your own merit." Julian's jaw set with determination. "Anyone who suggests otherwise will answer to me. And Natalie, if this becomes too complicated, if it affects your career negatively, we'll figure something else out. Maybe you take that consulting firm dream and run with it. I'll help you build it." Natalie felt her heart expand. You'd do that? Support me leaving? I'd do anything to see you happy and thriving, even if it means not seeing you every day at the office. Julian raised her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. Though I really hope it doesn't come to that, because I've gotten used to your face being the first thing I see each morning. The evening unfolded like a dream. They talked about everything: childhood memories, fears, hopes, the silly things that made them laugh. Julian told her about the pressure of inheriting his father's company at 25, the loneliness at the top, the way success felt hollow without someone to share it with. Natalie shared her own struggles, losing her parents young, helping Derek through his grief while managing her own, building a career from nothing through sheer determination. You're the strongest person I know, Julian said as they finished dessert. Not because you never fall, but because you always get back up. I learned from watching you, Natalie admitted. Your dedication, your refusal to accept defeat, the way you turn obstacles into opportunities, you inspired me even when you didn't know I existed. I always knew you existed. I just didn't let myself see how much you mattered. Julian paid the bill and stood, offering his hand. Walk with me. They strolled through the quiet streets, hand in hand, talking and laughing like old friends discovering they were meant to be more. When they reached her building, Julian walked her to the door, but didn't try to push for more. Instead, he cupped her face gently. Thank you for giving me this chance, he said quietly. For seeing past the cold boss to the man underneath who's been waiting for someone like you his whole life. Thank you for finally seeing me, Natalie whispered back. The kiss was soft, tentative, perfect. A promise of beginnings, not an ending. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. Over the following months, they navigated their new reality with care and intention. At work, they were consummate professionals, maintaining boundaries that protected both of them. But after hours, they built something beautiful. Quiet dinners, movie nights on Natalie's couch, meeting each other's friends and family. Derek eventually approved after a thorough Big Brother interrogation that left Julian sweating but laughing. Julian kept his promise, mixed about changing. He left work at reasonable hours, took actual vacations, learned to delegate. He discovered that life was richer with balance, that success meant nothing without someone to celebrate with. Natalie bloomed under the attention, no longer running herself into exhaustion, finally allowing herself to be cared for as much as she cared for others. 6 months after that first dinner, Julian stood in front of the entire company at their annual meeting. Natalie sat in the audience, nervous about what he'd say. They'd kept their relationship relatively private, professional at work, but rumors had circulated despite their discretion. I want to talk about something personal, Julian began, and the room went silent. When I took over this company 10 years ago, I thought success meant sacrificing everything else. Work came first, always. I measured my worth in profits and productivity. I was wrong. He found Natalie's eyes in the crowd. Someone taught me that real success means balance. It means building something sustainable, creating a workplace where people can excel without destroying themselves. It means recognizing that behind every job title is a human being with needs, dreams, and limits. That's why I'm implementing new company-wide policies. Mandatory vacation time, mental health days, flexible scheduling for parents, support for continuing education. Julian smiled. Because a company is only as strong as its people, and people need time to live lives worth working for. The applause was thunderous. After the meeting, colleagues congratulated Natalie. Not with snide remarks about favoritism, but with genuine appreciation for the positive changes everyone could feel happening. You did this, Julian told her later in his office. We did this, Natalie corrected. Together. That night, walking through the park where Julian had first kissed her, he stopped suddenly and turned to face her. The evening sun cast golden light through the trees, and his expression was serious, nervous, hopeful. Natalie Brooks, falling for you was the best accident of my life. Julian reached into his pocket. You woke me up, made me better, taught me what really matters. You see me, all of me, and somehow still choose to stay. Natalie's hands flew to her mouth as he dropped to one knee. I don't want to be your boss anymore. I want to be your partner, your equal, your home. He opened the small box, revealing a simple but beautiful ring. Will you marry me?